Book 2, Chapter 2 of The Adventures of Gil Blas of Santillane by Alain René Lesage, translated by Tobias Smollett. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Book 2, Chapter 2, The Canon's Illness, His Treatment, the Consequence, the Legacy to Gil Blas. I stayed 3 months with the licentiate Sedillo without complaining of bad nights. At the end of that time he fell sick. The distemper was a fever, and it inflamed the gout. For the first time in his life, which had been long, he called in a physician. Dr. Sangrado was sent for, the Hippocrates of Valladolid. Dame Jacintha was for sending for the lawyer first, and touched that string. But the patient thought it was time enough, and had a little will of his own upon some points. Away I went, therefore, for Dr. Sangrado, and brought him with me, a tall, withered, wan executioner of the sisters three, who had done all their justice for at least these 40 years. This learned forerunner of the undertaker had an aspect suited to his office. His words were weighed to a scruple, and his jargon sounded grand in the ears of the uninitiated. His arguments were mathematical demonstrations, and his opinions had the merit of originality. After studying my master's symptoms, he began with medical solemnity. The question here is to remedy an obstructed perspiration. Ordinary practitioners in this case would follow the old routine of salines, diuretics, volatile salts, sulfur and mercury, but purges and sudorifics are a deadly practice. Chemical preparations are edged tools in the hands of the ignorant. My methods are more simple and more efficacious. What is your usual diet? I live pretty much upon soups, replied the canon, and eat my meat with a good deal of gravy. Soups and gravy, exclaimed the petrified doctor. Upon my word, it is no wonder you are ill. High living is a poisoned bait, a trap set by sensuality to cut short the days of wretched man. We must have done with pampering our appetites. The more insipid, the more wholesome. The human blood is not a gravy. Why, then you must give it such a nourishment as will assimilate with the particles of which it is composed. You drink wine, I warrant you. Yes, said the licentiate, but diluted. Oh, finely diluted, I dare say, rejoined the physician. This is licentiousness with a vengeance, a frightful course of feeding. Why, you ought to have died years ago. How old are you? I am in my 69th year, replied the canon. So I thought, quoth the practitioner. A premature old age is always the consequence of intemperance. If you had only drank clear water all your life, and had been contented with plain food, boiled apples, for instance, you would not have been a martyr to the gout, and your limbs would have performed their functions with lubricity. But I do not despair of setting you on your legs again, provided you give yourself up to my management. The licentiate promised to be upon his good behaviour. Sangrado then sent me for a surgeon of his own choosing, and took from him 6 good porringers of blood, by way of a beginning to remedy this obstinate obstruction. He then said to the surgeon, Master Martin Onez, you will take as much more 3 hours hence, and tomorrow you will repeat the operation. It is a mere vulgar error that the blood is of any use in the system. The faster you draw it off, the better. A patient has nothing to do but to keep himself quiet. With him, to live is merely not to die. He has no more occasion for blood than a man in a trance. In both cases, life consists exclusively in pulsation and respiration. When the doctor had ordered these frequent and copious bleedings, he added a drench of warm water at very short intervals, maintaining that water in sufficient quantities was the grand secret in the materia medica. He then took his leave, telling Dame Jacintha and me, with an air of confidence, that he would answer for the patient's life if his system was fairly pursued. The housekeeper, though protesting secretly against this new practice, bowed to his superior authority. In fact, we set on the kettles in a hurry, and as the physician had desired us above all things to give him enough, we began with pouring down 2 or 3 pints at as many gulps. An hour after we beset him again, then returning to the attack time after time, we fairly poured a deluge into his poor stomach. The surgeon, on the other hand, taking out the blood as we put in the water, we reduced the old canon to death's door in less than 2 days. This venerable ecclesiastic, able to hold it out no longer, as I pledged him in a large glass of his new cordial, said to me in a faint voice, "Hold, Gil Blas, do not give me any more, my friend. It is plain death will come when he will come in spite of water, and though I have hardly a drop of blood in my veins, I am no better for getting rid of the enemy. The ablest physician in the world can do nothing for us when our time is expired. Fetch a notary, I will make my will." At these last words, pleasing enough to my fancy, I affected to appear unhappy, and concealing my impatience to be gone. "Sir," said I, "you are not reduced so low, thank God, but you may yet recover." "No, no," interrupted he, "my good fellow, it is all over. I feel the gout shifting, and the hand of death is upon me. Make haste, and go where I told you." I saw sure enough that he changed every moment, and the case was so urgent that I ran as fast as I could, leaving him in Dame Jacintha's care, who was more afraid than myself of his dying without a will. I laid hold of the first notary I could find. "Sir," said I, "the licentiate Sedillo, my master, is drawing near his end. He wants to settle his affairs. There is not a moment to be lost." The notary was a dapper little fellow, who loved his joke, and inquired who was our physician. At the name of Doctor Sangrado, hurrying on his cloak and hat, "For mercy's sake," cried he, "let us set off with all possible speed, for this doctor dispatches business so fast that our fraternity cannot keep pace with him. That fellow spoils half my jobs." With this sarcasm he set forward in good earnest, and as we pushed on to get the start of the grim tyrant, I said to him, "Sir, you are aware that a dying testator's memory is sometimes a little short. Should my master chance to forget me, be so good as to put in a word in my favour." "That I will, my lads," replied the little proctor. "You may rely on it, I will urge something handsome if I have an opportunity." The licentiate, on our arrival, had still all his faculties about him. Dame Jacintha was by his bedside, laying in her tears by wholesale. She had played her game, and bespoken a handsome remembrance. We left the notary alone with my master, and went together into the antechamber, where we met the surgeon, sent by the physician for another and a last experiment. We laid hold of him. "Stop, Master Martin," said the housekeeper, "you cannot go into Signor Sedillo's room just now. He is giving his last orders, but you may bleed away when the will is made." We were terribly afraid, this pious gentlewoman and I, lest the licentiate should go off with his will half finished, but by good luck the important deed was executed. We saw the proctor come out, who, finding me on the watch, slapped me on the shoulder, and said with a simper, "Gil Blas is not forgotten." At these words I felt the most lively joy, and was so well pleased with my master for his kind notice, that I promised myself the pleasure of praying for his soul after death, which event happened anon. For the surgeon having bled him once more, the poor old man, quite exhausted, gave up the ghost under the lancet. Just as he was breathing his last, the physician made his appearance, and looked a little foolish, notwithstanding the universality of his deathbed experience. Yet far from imputing the accident to the new practice, he walked off affirming with intrepidity that it was owing to their having been too lenient with the lancet, and too chary of their warm water. The medical executioner, the surgeon, seeing that his functions also were at an end, followed Dr. Sangrado. As soon as we saw the breath out of our patron's body, Dame Jacintha, Ina Silla, and myself joined in a decent chorus of funeral lamentation, loud enough to produce a proper effect in the neighbourhood. The emblem of a life to come, though she had more reason than any of us to rejoice, took the soprano part, and screamed out her afflictions in a most pathetic manner. The room in an instant was crowded with people, attracted less by compassion than curiosity. The relations of the deceased no sooner got wind of his departure than they pounced down upon the premises and sealed up everything. From the housekeeper's distress, they thought there was no will, but they soon found their mistake, and that there was one without a flaw. When it was opened, and they learned the disposition of the testator's principal property in favour of Dame Jacintha and the little girl, they pronounced his funeral oration in terms not a little disparaging to his memory. They gave a broad apostrophe at the same time to the godly legatee, and a few blessings to me in my turn. It must be owned I had earned them. The licentiate, heaven reward him for it, to secure my remembrances through life, expressed himself thus in a paragraph of his will. Item. As Gil Blas has already some little smattering of literature, to encourage his studious habits, I give and bequeath to him my library, all my books, and my manuscripts, without any drawback or exception. I could not conceive where this said library might be. I had never seen any. I only knew of some papers with 5 or 6 bound books on 2 little deal shelves in my master's closet, and that was my legacy. The books, too, could be of no great use to me. The title of one was The Complete Man Cook, another a treatise on indigestion with the methods of cure. The rest were the 4 parts of the breviary, half eaten up by the worms. In the article of manuscripts, the most curious consisted of documents relating to a lawsuit in which the prebendary was once engaged for his stall. After having examined my legacy with more minuteness than it deserved, I made over my right and title to these invidious relations. I even renounced my livery and took back my own suit, claiming my wages as my only reward. I then went to look out for another place. As for Dame Jacintha, besides her residue under the will, she had some snug little articles, which, by the help of her good friend, she had appropriated to her own use during the last illness of the licentiate. End of Book 2, Chapter 2.